Hi, Sahaj. Hi.
Hi there.
For some reason, I didn't like different
Hi.
camera today. Hi.
Hi everyone, how are you all doing?
Like it was mostly holidays, bunch of like unrelated stuff, and also one very algorithmical issue. Like, yeah, maybe we'll discuss it today, and maybe later I will tell you what I worked like last 2 weeks, which was pretty interesting. So let's start by. So I posted agenda into the channel, and thanks Rob for submitting agenda. It's helpful. So I think we have everybody in, everyone who added the self-enter agenda, and if you didn't add it yourself, like, please add yourself in agenda. And let's start. So first thing, if you want to participate with meeting, you need to sign specification membership agreement, participation guideline, and accept code of conduct. It's yes, yeah, I will merge them afterwards. Only if you have like agenda items or something. Okay, yeah, yeah. What's thanks for submitting, Dotun. Thanks for submitting. I'll measure it afterwards. So you need to sign these documents, and it's the same documents for every working group. So if you're watching YouTube and want to participate in this or other working group on the GraphQL Foundation, please sign these documents. So let's start with introducing attendees, and let's go in the order what we have an agenda. And if you didn't add yourself to the agenda yet, you can introduce yourself in the end. So hi, my name is Ivan, and I work in Apple. Rob, you next.
Hey, I'm Rob, work at First Dibs, and I've been working on the defer and stream spec proposal.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm from the Guild, and I'm also interested in talking about Defense Street today.
Hi, I'm Dotun, also from the Guild. Here mostly to listen today about the first stream and everything going on.
Hey, Uli from the Guild, also mostly listening.
Hi, I'm Sahaj from the Guild, help maintain GraphQL.js and hear about a couple of pull requests and issues open.
My name isn't in the agenda yet, but I'm Alex. I'm from Yelp, and I'm working on client control nullability.
Great. And second, after that, we have like review agenda. We don't yet doing note taking since we're like still small group. Review agenda. So anything else you want to add today? For example, anyone wants to propose any other topic to agenda before we start going one by one?
Yeah, I'm gonna open a PR in a second, but I'd like to get to the experimental flags and what the plan is for that.
Yeah, it's related to basically Canary releases. Yeah, but we can discuss it. Yeah, so next item is review previous meeting action items. I think we didn't submit most of them, but basically like all the recent ones except like I promise I had to explain like instance of impact. I think like it's even better if I write some document or something. I still need to do that. Other than that, like all other action items from previous time, like Canary releases and documentation website, everything is in agenda today. So let's start with agenda items. So Rob, you first with stream and defer.
Yeah, so I have, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, before we switch, because related to all agenda items. Right before this meeting, I'm sorry about doing it last minute, but yeah, I did some stuff related to previous action items. So I much like SHPR for documentation website, and I released new version of GraphQL.js 16.3.0, and I switch main to 17.0.0 alpha 0. So it's like stuff that promised like last time. And since I wanted to tell it before we start agenda because related to half of agenda items basically. Let's sorry Rob about interrupting. Yeah, let's switch to your agenda item about different stream.
Yeah, no problem. So I wanted to talk specifically about how in GraphQL.js we want to allow users to opt in to defer and stream. Just for the background, definitely for the initial release, I think that it was a good point brought up that it probably shouldn't be enabled by default. Also, I think that there may be use cases going forward where some servers may not ever want to do it if they're not using a network layer that is compatible with that type of thing. So I have implemented right now just a flag on the GraphQL schema constructor that both enables the execution and inserts the two directives into the past directives. Yeah, and I'm going to post the discussion issue I have around this where there was a lot of conversation around that. And just hoping that we could figure out what the best way forward is for this today.
Yeah, so a question here. I think like main discussion is either it should be enabled by default or disabled by default. I think everybody agrees that we need option, right? Some kind of option to
Yeah,
enable
we
streaming.
all agree. We all agree that we need to have the option to enable or disable. I think we just not fully agree on how it should be done, and how this should be propagated to other libraries later. I mean, if we'll do a small change now that will make it easier for Apollo server, but will require changing 20 other libraries, or I guess the other way around eventually.
Yeah, actually, it's a little bit unrelated. I also thought about that. So I object, like I think I don't remember who proposed it, but I think it's consensus at the guild to do it like explicit. You need to say like, please support defer. My objection to that was like we probably all agree it's temporary, right? With fork. So in future, like everybody will support stream and defer. So we're discussing like mostly transition period. So if you assume that,
I think that's already like, it depends, because like not every server must actually allow deferring and streaming results, because like I think it's a certain it's not really clear per the different stream spec right now, and also by the GraphQL over HTTP spec, because like you could have the defer and stream directive in your schema, but that does not really imply that the result must actually be deferred or streamed. Because, for example, if you have a client that does not understand defer and stream and sends a request, but only accepts application JSON or something, and not like application multipart data, then he wouldn't be able to like interpret a stream result, right? So in that case, the server would have to opt out of defer and stream anyways. So I think it's not like always support defer or stream, or it's more like on a request basis, we need to a way to determine whether we want to use defer and streamed results or like event streams.
I would even add to that it's like it feels like a server feature more than a schema feature.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Because if you support different stream, it's a matter of how you implemented the server, and it shouldn't be part of the schema itself. At least from my point of view, maybe I'm missing something here.
I guess it was like the previous discussions that we had, it was kind of like this, the schema is like the way that the server communicates its capabilities. And so saying that it has defer and stream directives is telling the client that it can support them. And
but you mean like through introspection, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the unanswered question is like, just because the server supports it doesn't mean that the server always sends deferred and streamed results back if the defer or stream directive is used, correct?
Yeah, I mean, so what we have, so yeah, because there's two layers of it, I guess. In the spec, I have written that defer and stream is not mandatory, so a server could not support it at all, and in those cases, it should not be in its introspection. But then, as far as honoring the individual defer and stream directives, it's a should recommendation and not a must. Where like for like the RFC like defines what the definition of should, must, and optional, and so it's 3 different levels. Where I don't think that it should really be designed around a server not doing it. It's like, it's just that we're just using should, and that means that if the server has like a good reason, it should do it, but it should understand the full implications of ignoring it. Just to clarify, should. So I don't think it's likely that, like, it shouldn't be like a normal behavior. I think that there's queries going in with defer and stream, and the server is ignoring most of them.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about use cases where it couldn't be like that. But the only thing that I have in mind right now would be like if you're using persistent operations or queries. Maybe there the client doesn't actually know the actual operation, but even then doesn't make too much sense. Another thing would be like if there's like too much traffic to opt out of it, but doesn't really make sense as well.
That's kind of what we heard from Facebook, that they had some way where they could on the server override it, and they didn't want their server to be spec and compliant. So that's why they had asked us for that it be a should and not a must. Also, just that it keeps things open. I don't know if like we find out in the future that some specific pattern of defer is always less performant than ignoring it, that then a server could make that an optimization. But otherwise, you had said, Lauren, a case where a client sends a query that contains defer or stream, but it doesn't actually support the response type. Is that
Exactly.
what would that use case be?
If I understand correctly, I just want to add something to that. Isn't the same case where, let's say, a consumer of a GraphQL schema would try to send a subscription to a server that maybe doesn't have a transport, but does have the root type of subscription defined, right? I mean, it's a matter of like understanding the capabilities, and that, or I misunderstood, because
Yeah, that definitely sounds like an equivalent case. I'm not sure.
yeah. And the way that you opt in is by let's say adding the subscription type to the schema, and this is the way you opt in the subscription, and then you are in charge of implementing the transport and everything. So that's like the reasoning for making the schema in charge of stream and defer. But I mean, just like, so if I understand correctly, if we delegate, like move the responsibility of defining or declaring that you want to use stream and defer, so why not just let the schema define the directives? I mean, I understand that like a feature flag might be like a nice API, but eventually we'll need to remove it probably. So we can just say we have the option internally to have stream and defer, but if you want to do it, just add this definition of a directive to your schema. And this is the way you opt in without feature flags, just like we do with subscriptions.
That's also one of the solutions that I proposed in my sum up of all the discussions we had in the GitHub discussion. And another issue I see right now with having a feature flag that is then also adding directives to the directive thing, like on the schema, we already have a directives option. And now we add another option to the constructor, which modifies the directives option. And to me, it kind of seems like weird and redundant that we like have something that mutates another option. Yeah, it just feels a bit dirty to me.
Hi, Yaakov here. How's it going? I just want to suggest also that, you know, there may be custom implementations of the defer and stream directives. So, and it's important to, you know, to make sure that we still provide support for those as well. So if we have like a flag on the schema, it should be, you know, there should be some way to, you know, substitute, you know, your own directive for that. So I'm not sure how you know, currently that's a little complex, because you might want to not get the default directive, but still enable defer and stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think we can ignore that particular use case because like defer is stream and defer is experimental directives. So what we want to standardize anyway, and people who implemented it, they knew what they like. It's experimental. It's like, so if you choose to use it production on in your library, you properly document it and you basically ready for it to become like standard in little bit different shape with little bit different arguments. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing that it's experimental. I'll point out what the use case in particular. For right now, according to the spec, there's no way. Just for one example, I don't think we have implemented yet when an individual stream might complete. We send the has next no if the entire stream is over, but let's say an individual stream completes, we don't yet notify the client. We may never, within the spec, choose to notify the client of that. But right now, one of the many things that I wish I had time to do is to set that up working in GraphQL Executor. And so that would be a custom, argument probably, whether you would want that additional information. And so, you need to modify the, currently experimental included directive for stream within GraphQL.js, or, much more simply probably would be to, roll your own directive. That's just an example. Meaning, even though it's experimental, I don't see how that changes anything. You still, you may want to provide custom arguments. I mean, there's extensions, the ability to add in extensions to the current payload format. So there's a lot of cool things that we could enable on the custom side.
I would think that if you're doing that, you would also need changes to the execution algorithm, or just the execution library. So I think if you're like, I can't see how we could make the default execution like accept any kind of arbitrary defer or stream if it is intended to behave differently, right?
I think you're right. I'm just thinking about that now, trying to work through it. I mean, right now, what I'm talking about is within GraphQL Executor, which obviously is a custom, as a package separate than GraphQL.js that does, a few custom things differently during execution. So yeah, you would need to give your own execution. You would need to have your own execution library to implement, or in your own executor to implement some of those custom things. But at the same time, I mean, if there's a flag on the schema that says that defer and stream are not enabled, I mean, I guess that flag would only be true for the native GraphQL.js and would just be ignored by my custom executor. And I suppose that might work, but it's just a little strange.
I mean, that's also my opinion. Why don't we do it the other way around? If defer or stream is within the directives array that you pass to the GraphQL constructor, then internally we set the is defer stream flag enabled flag to true if there's like any directive within that array that has the name defer or stream, instead of doing it the other way around where we have this additional feature flag that then pushes new directives into the directives array.
Yeah, but I guess like the defaults matters, right? So if by default the directives are not there and the end user adds the directives, I guess we can infer that the user wants to use different string. It's fine not to put it by default. for sure, as long as it's experimental. I just feel like a very explicit feature flag is a bit too much, because we can infer or assume what the user wants based on the schema.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Like, I have like let's distinguish a couple of cases. One case, if like person explicitly specify defer or stream directive in his SDL. So it's much like Yakov case, and like person wants like different stream. Server library in that case can check like if schema have defer directive and like give error and say like we're not supporting defer stream, or warning saying we will ignore. So we're discussing like default one. It's a question like if person don't write anything, and basically like some of users don't care about stream and defer, they don't write anything, don't specify anything. So in this case, like I think server should decide basically. If server supports stream and defer, it's like after thinking a lot about this, I think problem here is that GraphQL.js decides. It should be server that decide like what's is stream defer supported or not. If user like explicitly specify it, server need to do error or warning or something. But like it's a problem that default is like GraphQL.js injecting default directives at all, like in every stage. So if you do like schema transformation at every stage, default directives are injected, and it's like I think it worked for really simple use cases previously, but now since we have like the whole ecosystem of like one library create schema, another library expose it over CTP. So right now it's like typed GraphQL or GraphQL.js configured by typed GraphQL basically decide stream and defer, and server like just get schema with directives inside. So my proposal is a little bit more related to item number. I think we have it. Item number 10 on the agenda. But for number 10, it's like very similar. It's a problem with default directives. One function add default directives, another one doesn't. My proposal is just shifted like until the end. So a library that call execute should be responsible for adding default values. Execute, validate, and basically libraries that process requests should add defaults.
Ivan, I'm not sure I got all of that, but I think I got some of it. I think that the GraphQL.js does have to decide to some extent about defer and stream, because as mentioned, once we have these namespace directives that are in the spec, I don't think you can add custom functionality to defer and stream and still be spec compliant. But you can no longer use defer and stream for any other custom, for any other custom meaning that the defer and stream directives have to be honored, strongly recommended, except the one situation in which the server thinks there's better performance otherwise. And if you're not, you won't be spec compliant if you have custom directives called defer and stream that do something else. So if defer and stream are in the schema, then it is GraphQL.js to some extent that has to decide rather than the server. And then there's maybe I may have misunderstood that part of what you were saying, but I think to that point, I think to some extent GraphQL.js, it's not really GraphQL.js, so to speak. It's the schema generation library that decides, on whether it's enabled or not.
Yeah, like I can share my screen really quick. Like we have broader discussion. Just want to see if this particular solution solve it. If not, we can discuss it more, or even like discuss it asynchronously. I will share a screen for a second. So my proposal is right now default directives are injected here. So like actually like not build schema, but if you do another example like here. So build schema inject directives. Extend schema return like another schema also with default directives. So like every stage of schema processing, default directives are added. Which my proposal is, and for also for other reason, here is like a list of two other reasons, like here, two other reasons why we need that. And Yakov is partly related to issue that you opened about validation errors. I responded there. But basically, my proposal is that execute and validate another function that should work on complete schema, should require like a wrapper around schema. So we should recognize that we basically have two schema in not fully completed schema, meaning like, for example, GraphQL.js required you to specify query type, or every schema should have include. But in the process of building schema, you can create schemas without like root query type. It's old. It's like a schema that final one, the schema that you pass to execute should have like query type by spec. So my proposal is to make it more explicit, create basically new class, and that class will be responsible for in constructor for validating and for injecting default directives. And here you can configure it. We can add like another option, basically default directives. And it's not confusing since like directives come in here and default directives, you can add like a second argument, like object with default directives.
I have to just, I'm not 100% sure, Ivan, maybe you can explain. I mean, I think we're all aligned on the fact that as long as stream and defer are experimental, we shouldn't add the directives by default, or I missed anything here. So this specific topic of stream defer directives doesn't, I mean, this could be like a very, let's say like a nice change, but I'm not sure how it's related to that topic.
Yeah,
or
idea was that in future, like right now I switched mine to alpha, and we can start like doing stream and defer, and in process of standardizing it through, finally standardizing it through working group. So either like in 17.00 or some other release, it became standard. So I'm basically I'm agree with Warren idea of like let's don't do flags at all, because at some point like when stream and defer became part of a spec, what's the difference between include and stream and defer? There is like both spec compliance directive. Why why I'm so we either should include all default directives or don't include any default any standard directives. Like why? What's the difference? Like when stream and default
But
became
it's like
part
a more broad discussion, I feel. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, this is a discussion we should all have at some point. And I agree like how the schema building should be constructed, and is it like, let's say, something that could be like step by step, and it's fine to do validations after composing the entire schema. And I agree, but I mean, I'm just not 100% sure how this,
Okay.
I mean, for the concrete issue of stream and defer feature flags, and to move on with that topic, I feel like we need like a, let's say, an intermediate solution, something now that will address this issue and will let us to move forward, because otherwise we can't wait for like changes from like a year from now. I'm not saying it will take a year, but you know, broader changes, especially around schema building and changing classes, takes time. And I feel like we need something, we need like a decision. No, I mean, it's not like I don't feel like it's a heavy decision, right? I mean, we have like a bunch of solutions, and we have pros and cons. We just need to decide on how to specifically solve this one problem, and then later we can do a lot of other things. That's fine.
Okay. In that case, like we can agree on the simplest solution. Basically, solution that and sorry if I mispronounce your name, Oren, right? Propose.
Correct.
Basically, you proposing not adding like any fuck at all, just passing directives. Since we in alpha stage, we can add that because it's like zero code, basically zero changes. And during alpha stage, we can add like discuss other way to enable it. Like my issue with that, it's like currently ergonomic one, but it's fair that such issues should not block adoption, basically. So that's my proposal. Okay. Yeah, I think Dothan, you're right. So I want to execute that plan, but if it's fail, it should be like something usable anyway. So let's do default one, so asking user to specify different stream manually, basically. And I will work on that thing, or if somebody else want to help and work on the proposal. And if it's happening, we will have better way to enable directives.
So we're saying that defer and stream directives get exported from GraphQL.js. They're not included in specified directives, and the execution will check if those directives are in the schema to decide whether.
Yeah, like.
And just to say, like a side note on that, Rob, I think this is like a good approach. It still does not solve what Apollo and David Glasser from Apollo asked for, if I understand correctly, because if a user will add those directives explicitly to their schema and will try to use Apollo server, it will probably fail. I guess like the ideal solution is not changing the whole ecosystem, is maybe just add like an assertion in Apollo server for that.
Probably yes. And the cool thing, we move forward and doesn't change design space, basically. Like, let's postpone it because I feel like there is so many things about stream and defer we agree, and few things we disagree. So let's measure stuff that we agree. I'm like, my thing, I don't like ergonomics of like injecting directives but manually, but it's alpha. So if we found better solution before release, we'll implement. If not, not. Like my proposal, I sent it in a chat. It's like that issue. So basically, like changing schema construction a bit in non-breaking way. So yeah.
So just to summarize what I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong. We'll proceed it as with an alpha. The way that you opt into stream and defer is by adding explicitly the directives to your schema. The execute function will adjust based on the existence of these directives. And to address the issues that we just talked with on like a Apollo server or other libraries that might not support stream and defer yet, it's part of their responsibility to make sure that the schema that they're going to execute is have like all the capabilities that the server has. So if there are no option to run stream and defer, it's the server's responsibility to address it and warn the user somehow.
Yeah.
Maybe also the same for subscriptions, right?
Yep.
Like if the server doesn't support subscriptions, it should be responsible of notifying.
Yeah, I think, by the way, I think today if you just provide like a schema with subscription to Apollo server without, let's say Apollo server 3 that doesn't have like a transport by default, nothing will happen, right? There's no like a warning or an exception. I'm fine with like having a warning or an exception because stream and defer is still in alpha and it's still experimental. So it should be more, let's say, descriptive that you have something that is not supported in your schema. But yeah, in the future, I guess it's the same as subscription. If you don't have a transport, that's user responsibility.
Yes, one thing I want to clarify. I think I need to check, but I think current behavior of execute, if you don't have, you can create schema without default directives right now. Through constructor, you can specify directives as empty array and do whatever, and it will miss skip and include. But executor still understands skip and include. It's validation responsibility to error on
the non-directive non-directive rule should probably assert.
So
right, I was going to ask that.
So executor don't need to adjust, like check if you need to basically the same responsibility as skip and include. So skip and include don't like validate. So
the execution actually supports it, but if you don't have specified on the schema, it will just fail on validation before getting to execution. That makes sense?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. It's a little bit smaller and less test cases and less like promises, but in reality, it should not be an issue for anybody, basically.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay.
Can we have a solution?
Can we just also briefly discuss Benji's proposal? I can share my screen. Did everyone see that?
Yes, I saw it. Also talked briefly with him about it.
Yeah, what are everyone's thoughts on this? I actually had built something similar to this early on. There was a lot of code duplication because you need both 2 versions of execute, 2 versions of the GraphQL function. But yeah, just want to hear everyone's thoughts.
I think we already achieved 1 and 2, right? Because if Yeah, so it's only about having a separate function aside from execute for doing defer stream, right?
I'm not sure how this differs from an execute flag, an execute level flag, meaning it gives you some type safety. But you know, when you can just have a wrapper that asserts like if that if it gives you the wrong response with the flag, then there's been some sort of error, just like we have with execute sync. I think in general we may eventually need, as Lauren pointed out, a flag on execute as well. Let's say if the client specifies that they can't get a multi-part response, as I think the case that he mentioned. But you know, I think right now it's pretty easy to set up an execute flag. We have that, and if this could be easy as well, technically speaking.
I think one of the benefits that also, what's he called? I don't know his name, Marisa, it's his GitHub name. He's super into this what's it called, Cloudflare worker stuff, and he wants to achieve super small bundles wherever possible. And by not bundling the functionality you don't need, you can achieve smaller bundle size, and things could be a bit smaller and therefore faster. But to me, I also don't see the big benefit of splitting it into separate functions, to be honest.
I think the benefit here is when we do release 17 with defer and stream, it's not a breaking change in the type of execute and GraphQL, where it could either be a promise or an async iterable. That's the benefit, I think. I don't think there would be any code size differences, because it's basically execute. Regular execute would have all the logic for everything, but just be throwing an error if it gets back an async iterable, the same way that the sync function does, where if it gets back a promise, it throws an error. So by not including execute incremental, you're not really saving anything, because that's just a wrapper that does basically execute would call execute incremental and throw an error if it gets back an async iterable.
Yeah,
wouldn't be any code savings.
I don't really have strong opinions about this, but having just one function that does it seems more easier to build servers with it, instead of having to figure out, okay, which one do I need to use for my server?
I think execute incremental would still, you wouldn't have to figure it out per request which one to use. That would still be able to handle requests that don't have defer and stream. It's just that the original execute that doesn't handle async iterables would just throw an error if it got one back.
Now that you're right, there's also subscribe. To be honest, when I first started out working with GraphQL.js, I was even a bit confused, because why do we have execute and subscribe? Why is it not just execute? Why do I have to determine the document type before, and then I either call subscribe or execute? And now with this, we would also have an additional case where you need to first detect, is it a subscription, is it a mutation, is it a query, or is it a mutation or query? Or even then you also have a subscription, which could be using defer and stream, right? Or do I get this wrong? Subscriptions can also be deferred and streamed, right? Yeah, so then what does subscribe? Does subscribe then also, do we then also have a subscribe incremental, or does subscribe then wrap both execute and execute incremental? That's also a question that arises if we start doing this execute incremental, I think.
I mean, I think a structure in the long term, right now in GraphQL Executor, we've integrated completely execute and subscribe. I think in the long term, it might make sense to have 3 functions. One would be regular execute that has everything. One would be execute sync that can only have values and not promises or async iterables. And then maybe something like execute but not incremental, which throws an error, if it does get an incremental but allows a promise or sync. I mean, I think those might be the three that might be most useful in the long term. Right now, I think like Ivan was saying, like we just want to get something going on the feature branch, and I don't know that we need to finalize it right now, but that'd be the long term proposition that I think would make the most sense.
I want to clarify about execute sync. Basically, for execute sync, we need to throw, because you cannot do synchronous promises in Node.js. It's possible, but through like very bad hacks. With async iterable, it's possible to convert async iterable to promise. Basically, you do initial call and you call next on async iterable until you get the full response when you measure it and return. So if somebody at some point wants to work, like have valid use case, why async iterable is problematic for something, we can always add async, execute async function. Because we have execute sync, we can add execute async that return promise, but doesn't error, because you can convert async iterable to one promise. It's possible. So, but only if somebody have use cases and willing to actually contribute it. So we can always add it afterwards as like wrapper.
I mean, in general, I guess I'm in favor of pulling off the Band-Aid on the breaking changes in the types, to get at that point more explicitly.
Yeah, I also agree. I think like there is full consensus that the stream and defer is coming. Like we all discuss the details, and like in every shape and form, as stream and defer require async iterable to be added as return value. So I also agree that we need to pull a trigger.
But I'm not sure, Lauren, did you have strong feelings about whether we also need an execute level flag in terms of that use case of when the client says that it doesn't have, can't support like a multi-part request?
Like I mentioned it, but as I think more about it, like I would rather first have this problem like in the real world before I like introduce this flag. I think for now we can just assume that if the directive is in the schema, that means it's enabled. So and then
and
in
if
the future,
client is using the directive, it means the client can handle it, the response.
Probably, right? So I would just ignore this for now until someone has like a more valid use case. Yeah.
And if, by the way, if a client can do their own validation, if a Apollo client or if Apollo Urkel doesn't support like streaming response, they themselves can, because like most of the client parse query anyway, even like simple clients. I think even Urkel is parsing stuff, so they can look and see it's have like different error. If they have like strong reason, why not support stream and defer?
Okay, so I think we're all on the same page now. I'll make that change where we remove the flag. Directives aren't added by default, and then I think I'll rebase, and then maybe we could publish another version.
One thing, if you have like if you have tutorials on how to use like blog posts or tutorials or stuff. It would be a good idea to add like this as instruction for 17.00 alpha if you use more recent GraphQL.js, or like if you in future, please check the current instruction. Basically, one thing I'm worried is that people start publishing articles saying like use stream defer like that, and in like half a year or a year, somebody Google it, find the article, and stuff is not like that, or he gets subpar experience. So like, since we didn't iron the stuff, just like banner. If you have code snippet somewhere, how to enable it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we'll put it in the README or something, how to enable it with the directives.
So added to the new documentation site we have now, right?
Yeah, yeah, we can have tutorial on stream defer, by the way. It's a good idea because it's a new thing. And sorry, Alex, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't been following super closely. Should I do the same thing for client controlled nullability? I should remove the flags that we. Is this the same thing, or are we talking about something completely different?
No, like, yeah, it's a little bit different because like stream defer doesn't produce any syntax, new syntax.
Okay.
And kind of like consensus a little bit bigger, I would say, on
Yes.
it's pretty big consensus on client-side nullability also, but yeah, comparatively. So thing here is mostly about like how to do it. Like, yeah. So
Yeah.
in your case, since we agreed, and technically I think it's even another stage, like extreme defer, like stage 2, and your proposal stage 1. So to unblock you, like having flag and parser makes sense.
Okay, so keep the flags.
Yeah, and especially I think it was still some discussion about, and I promised to write my opinion, and I will do it. I just remember that
Okay.
about syntax for list. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, a radical idea though would be to, I mean, I guess because we are talking about enabling it on the experimental branch, right, meaning the unstable main. The radical idea would be to just drop the feature flag for client-side nullability as well, and assume that if the client is using those, you know, the new operators in the document, then they are basically opting in.
yeah, question here is like prettier and other tools are using GraphQL.js parser. So if we drop flag, and I'm okay dropping it for alpha, but if we didn't, and like, I'm not sure we will standardize in time for like 17.00. Maybe it's happened. In that case, we will drop flag. So my idea is like we need some level of controlling. So for stream and defer, we have directive in schema to enable or disable it, and we need to have same thing for syntax. So it should be explicit. Like that's why I'm for having something like that. And technically, it's like, you know, stage 1. So let's I would say like let's do this flag and remove it afterwards, since removing flag is easier. One example.
Okay. Could we do a flag, basically a directive on the schema that says that we're supporting it? I mean, it's if directives are working so well, like I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe we can talk. Maybe I can make this suggestion offline.
Yeah, we can for suggestion offline. One quick thing: it's like prettier don't care about your schema. Some tools are like a poor client doesn't have any idea. GraphQL tag don't know anything about schema. So bunch of tools work with query syntax and they don't have access to a schema. So flag should be on the parse function, basically. Otherwise, it's the only way for tools working with only with queries without schema. Yeah, and since we have like long discussion, I think it was way more than 15 minutes. Yeah, it was like 45. So let's switch to other topics. Number 7, it's about get argument values from root. It's quick one. I just merged it. I don't like this function. I think it's problematic if person call it and we code it inside execute, we do it twice. The same word twice. I think like don't like current API, but with people who open with discussion. By the way, discussion is about like with internal function get argument values. Oh, I think I exposed the wrong one. Yeah. Yeah, I need to like I need to do it offline. I think I exposed wrong one. Yeah, but yeah, I will fix that offline. But basically, sorry, I forget that I'm not sharing my screen. So this is the issue, and it's about this function. And people said like it's already used and is de facto public IP, so it's need to be exposed. And I thought I exposed it, but I think I exposed another one accidentally. Yeah, I will fix that, but I think like issue resolved. Sahej, you added it into agenda. Do you have anything else to discuss on that one before we proceed?
No, I just wanted to bring it up so we can export this function because I don't know why this wasn't being like answered because this discussion was a long back ago thing. So
yeah, think about it. Basically, it's the same as we had like previously discussion previously. I wanted to have a nicer solution or to create like more appropriate public API, but I agree that we should not delay feature because we don't have like ideal solution, especially if it's like not connected to GraphQL spec. This thing is not connected to GraphQL spec. People use it, so there is no like reason why not expose it. If we want to create a better way to do something, it will be the feature, and we can deprecate this function. So yeah, it's explanation why. And right now I'm kind of rethinking how such issue resolved. So yeah, and since we switched to unstable main, it's basically mean like if we want, we can make it public and work on better solution in main. And when it's ready, we can deprecate the stuff that we made public previously. So no issues here. Anything else anyone wants to add on this topic before we switch to next one? Yeah, so I think we can switch to number 8, docs update, and it's the same thing happened here. So yeah, just to give a little bit context, Sahaj create documentation website. It's like preview version. So it's how like right now we have docs here on the GraphQL.org/GraphQL.js. Yeah, but it's not updated, not maintained, and it's not generated. So Sahaj basically took like tutorials and he moved Docosaurus side and also after generate that part. I had some issues with some scripts giving warnings and like some other internal stuff. So basically I planned to do it like way faster, but this took me like a bunch of tries to figure out some stuff. Technically, it's the same, nothing changed from Sahaj prototype, but I just clean up like some warnings, errors, and CI is now passed, so I merged it. Yeah. It's like update on that. Sahaj, do you want to add anything before we switch to discussing new steps?
So where is this deployed now?
Yeah, so it's not deployed. We need to
what's the
speak.
process for that?
Yeah, I think we can schedule call with, if you want, you can write, help by writing a letter to Ricky. I think he's the person who did it last time, so he configured Netlify and other things. So we can talk with him. Basically, I don't have any idea how GraphQL.org is hosted. I think he's the right person to ask about. So it would be great if I can do it myself, or you can write email to Ricky and edit me in CC, and we will have like call between 3 of us and discuss how to better do it, because I don't have any clue, and I don't have like Netlify passwords to do it, to change something anyway. Does it sound like next step?
Yeah. I will reach out and see how to get this deployed. Thank you.
Yeah. If we're stuck on that, we can ask people from GraphQL Foundation. I just think like through Rick it will be faster. If not, we can ask like GraphQL Foundation to give us like credential to Netlify and other stuff. One quick thing that I will write response asynchronously, but one thing we have right now a huge list. We need to you can help, or I can try to subdivide it to groups like languages and type and utilities, because list is huge. It's better than it's better than outdated docs, but we can improve it. And also, if anybody else wants to help with that, feel free, especially now everything is merged. So, and my requirement for PRs is like content-wise is pretty low. Only thing is CI should pass, and it shouldn't be any warning and like other like CI related stuff, but threshold for commit merging is lower, and it's not tied to any content basically. Yeah. So anything else anyone wants to add on that topic before we switch to next one? So let's switch to the next one. Next one is canary releases. Yeah, and client control knowability is part of them. So yeah, I did. I switched to 17.0.0 alpha on main. About canary releases, I need to check like change set suggested by Dotan. One thing I'm not sure about is like a change set is requires you to edit like some markdown file before merging pairs. What do you do in Guild? Do you require like every pair after to do that, or you do it yourself?
So I can explain this actually, because we're using like change sets on a large scale for like very big monorepositories. And the way it works is that if you're like developing a bug fix or like new feature in your own isolated branch, you can like execute a command locally, which is yarn change set or npm change set create. Then it gives you like a drop down where you select whether it's a fix, a patch, a fix, or major change. And then it generates a markdown file. And there you can write the change log for this feature or bug fix that you're writing. And then once and obviously you will commit this also to the branch you're working on. And once you merge that to the main branch, the change set bot will automatically create a pull request on the main branch, which removes the change sets that have accumulated on the main branch, and then updates all the change logs. The change logs can be a changelog.md file in each package, or it could also be like a GitHub release or something like that. So releasing a new version is as easy as just like merging the pull requests, and then it will take like all these changes that individuals wrote into the markdown files and make one big release log out of it. So it kind of solves the issue where you have to like go through all the commits and pick the relevant changes when you're doing a new release. Instead, you only have to like merge one pull request that is automatically created and rebased once new commits are merged or added to main. And another thing on top of that that is useful is that you can also like set up a bot that once there is a change set in a certain branch, it will automatically publish that to npm. Obviously, we shouldn't do that for like every branch, because especially like for branches from other people, which are not the source repository, GraphQL.js, that's a security risk. But especially for like features like defer and stream, this could have the benefit that once Rob pushes a new commit, automatically a new alpha version is built and also published to npm, and then people can immediately start testing it, and we don't need to wait for someone to do all that stuff manually. Yeah, so that's basically how we're using change sets right now, and also GraphQL is adopting them, and we all think that it might be a huge improvement for GraphQL.js as well.
Yeah, I need to check one, as we discussed like previously, my main requirement, and it's related to like automatic dependency updates. My main requirement is that stuff not polluting commit history. So commit history should be just changes. It should not be like meta commits.
I mean,
for
there's basically like on the individual branches, you don't really have like commits that clutter it, aside from like add change set or something. But then people, when we merge a pull request, it's squashed anyway, so that disappears. And the only time there will ever be like a commit created by change set on master on the main branch is actually only when you do a release where you bump the version. So that will be the only commit. And within that single commit, there will be like the version bumps of the packages. In that case, it's only a single package, and the updates of the changelogs if we store the changelog within the repository. As I said before, the change log can only be a GitHub release. So yeah, I don't think there will be like much noise generated by change sets in terms of
I'm okay.
commits.
Yeah, so I'm okay like with. So what we discussed previously, it's like two models for existing branches, 15 and 16. 16 became a branch. So model for them is only like fixes. So if somebody volunteered to backport feature, it's released. So basically idea more or less to release with every commit. And same, we discussed the same about Canary releases. So either like once per day or after every commit or like some form, basically, so people don't wait like releases. And I'm okay like if something is squashed. What I'm like worried about if I have like one actual commit and another commit to release it, so we double the number of commits. But I think we can review it asynchronously about particular tool and pros and cons and how to manage it better.
I mean, you can just take a look, for example, at the graphical repository and look at the commit history, and there you should actually see like that the cluttering is not really that much. And you can also look like how such a pull request or such a versioning commit does actually look like.
So yeah, I will look. I'm just worried that we technically like 3 hours, but it would be ideal to be an hour and a half or like, so don't want to like prolong with call too much for technical. Sorry, my headphones.
I'm not sure if you hear me.
You're fine.
Okay. So I think we can discuss change set, and I will take a look at graphical, especially since it's under GraphQL Foundation, and it's similar, not similar in some aspect, but similar in others. I will take a look how it's done in graphical.
We'll just post the links into the issue, so it's easier to find for people who want reference.
Yeah, great, thanks. Sahaj, you opened that one. Do you have any other like question background you want to provide?
For the canary releases,
Yeah, canary releases.
I mean, yeah, change that should work out for us. I don't understand why we are trying to minimize on one commit that just bumps the version number, because not like we do too many releases a day that this could be a potential issue in Git commit history.
Yeah, one thing we
This is
discussed
like an
previously-
over optimization for something that we don't even need.
Yeah, so one
Like,
thing
we're just going around the circles trying to optimize for like not having a commit or something, which like, I mean, the goal today is like, we are not even publishing anything and it takes forever to get a release out. And like, we can optimize anything. Like that's not the point. The point is to get canary releases. When can we get the canary releases is the question. Because this has been like, if we look at it, it started November 24th and we are still debating how to do a canary release. And this is not like a big thing. Like this is not a difficult job. Like people are doing canary releases for so long. Like this is not something new we are reinventing. So I think by this working group, we should figure out how to do canary releases, not just go back in circles come next month and be like, okay, this is the way we want to go with it.
Yeah, can we do it opposite direction? So can you prepare like APRs that do change set? And if by the next working group, like there is no alternative, we just merge it. If I find the time and I will work on something, in that case, like we can discuss pros and cons of two approaches, but we will have two approaches. If not, we will just merge like stuff that you prepare. Is it sounds
setting
like
that up thing, like I can set it up right now and send a pull request in next 5 minutes. It's not a difficult job. The thing is, now we are pushing it again to a month, and then after that month, it goes to March. And like, if you think about it, Alex needed, like, we're just lowering down, like, it's like contributors are waiting to get a release. Like, if I want to change on defer and stream, I have to ping you a couple times to get a release, and so I can test around on our projects. And it just doesn't seem ideal to me to wait for a month. Like, if I open a pull request, it should be just reviewed and like merged in like in a week or something. Because I mean, if you have an alternative, you can open a pull request and we can replace it. I don't think it's a wise choice to just wait for a month, because we already waited for like 3 months at this point. So
yeah, I still feel strongly about not wanting to create commit for every commit. I still think strongly. I agree with you.
But what are we trying to optimize here? Not like we have a high volume commit history coming in. It's not like we have a very big monorepo which has like hundreds of right? Like
I'm personally
there's no big gain. Like if this was Facebook, which operates at like terabytes of monorepos, yes, I agree, we can optimize this. But this is like a simple project. This is not even a monorepo. This is like a polyrepo with one.
So I will explain my position on that. So I'm reviewing history in GraphQL.js and other projects. So I'm like going to main repo. I open the history.
I mean, if we think about that case, you would only review like the file if you would do a git blame on the file. Like this commit only affects your package.json, and package.json doesn't really like. I mean, I've never diffed a package.json myself.
So what I do periodically, like even for graphical, I open like main history. So I open that link. So that one. And I do it for every repository. I use like when I update dependency, I open like a repo and see what changed in that repo. So I manually view and click from and see like what changed. GitHub allow you to diff between releases. So
I mean,
on
if we do
releases-
change sets, we do get like a pre-generated changelog with it. So we don't even need to see what is needed because changelog will like it will list out all the changes that were made in particular release. And if that's the goal, you have that thing already done with it.
Hello, Camille here. What Suggest is trying to actually explain is that we will do basically what you do here, and I send a link, which is a commit per release, which is basically the same, right? We squash, like we merge the pull request that actually releases a new version, and it becomes a commit, right? So there you have it.
Yeah, so I also send, I think, like when comparing branch, you actually see like all the commits between releases, and it's from GitHub UI. I also use that feature. You can, on the release page, you can click on changes. It's available on every release, and you see like what changed between releases. So my point is that history is available, and if you want, like, my position, if you do like one release per month, it's okay to have like commit. If we, after every commit, we will have another release commit, I think it's bad. Is it worth?
No. It's one.
I think
per
we
version.
have a misunderstanding what a canary release actually is here, because I think what Sahaj is thinking about is that for every commit that is pushed to a specific branch, there's automatically like an alpha version published to npm, and no changelog or GitHub release or anything required. It's just like something that we have the version of this commit for people to install, and the way that we don't need a fancy changelog for this or anything. What is enough is just the bot comments on the specific commit. Hey, this is published to npm. You can use this version for installing it and testing it locally. We don't need GitHub releases for this.
Yeah, so we don't release on npm. We don't create versions on npm, or version is.
It will just be like something like GraphQL add, then you have some commit, and that's like under the alpha tag. So it's not like tied to a specific version. It's just something arbitrary. And yeah, and people can just install that version of that commit with that. So they can just test the branch or the feature that's being developed in that specific branch. So they don't have to like go this extra mile of like installing GraphQL.js locally and then building everything and then yarn linking or npm linking it into their projects. If there's like a bug or something, they can just see, oh, someone did the pull request for that, nice, and then they can go into it, and then the pull request says, hey, we need feedback if that works for everyone, and then people can just like copy that version, install it locally, and just verify that it solves their specific issue, comment on the pull request, and everyone is happy.
In that case, it can work. So in that case, like everybody okay that we're doing, I'm not like have troubles to do if we have like some button or much or pull request to do releases manually once a month or once like some period, or after a big feature or a critical bug. I'm totally okay. We have it right now in commit history. I'm for doing it like faster. I'm just against like creating commit for every commit. So if it can be done through releases tied on commits, I'm okay. If it's like fit original desire for canary releases.
I will also like link a graphical pull request in the issue, where it shows the showcase, like you create a pull request, you can push your changes. In this case, it's Ricky. Then he added a change set, and then the bot of the pull request. So the bot works like this. If there's a change set, it will publish a Canary version 2 or alpha, whatever, to Canary, let's say Canary to NPM, and then it comments in that specific pull request, and then people can install it. And once a new commit is pushed to that pull request, the bot will automatically update the message. So people will always install the latest if they try out the pull request. I would just add it to the list of links.
And like version packages commit I currently see in graphical is because Ricky is not squashing commits into one, right? In pairs. If he did squashing, it will be one commit, or because like
I think we are confusing here two things. One thing is main alpha releases and Canary releases. The Canary releases work this way, that once you have a pull request branch and start pushing to it, the bot will automatically build and publish each commit in that pull request and comment on it, so people can try that out. And alpha releases on main or something are something completely different and are not related to this at all. The Canary releases are only
merge the pull request. Alpha
exactly.
If you're talking about Canary,
I think what they're trying to say is like that if you still use the tool, the automation tool, it has nothing to do with the Git history. You can get the Git history that you want and still use the automation tool. So what I think is, why won't we just start using it? And if you see that the Git history is wrong, then we could revert it, we could change it, we could just take the tool in another way. But that tool has nothing to do with how you do Git history. So I don't understand your argument of like why you're pushing away this tool because of Git history.
No, my idea is like my idea was, I thought what we're discussing here by Canary releases, and usually it's like for big projects, like maybe we're not so like big, but for like Chrome and like other things, Canary releases is cut from development branch, like main or develop or master or some kind. So I always assume Canary releases, by Canary we mean like Canary from main. If a question is to release like something from PR, I'm like totally okay for it. If this tool is not creating PR to like, if it's not creating commits, I'm like totally for it.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like you can also make the like automatic releases if you want on any branch, but it has nothing to do with the Git history. So yeah, like even if we do it in the Chrome way, again, it's two different things.
Not in the way I see on graphical, like every commit basically have like another commit. So like when I open like graphical.
Can you hear an example? What do you mean?
So I will send you. I will send you. Yeah. I already posted. And
those are actually not Canary releases. Those are regular releases. Those actually bump the package versions and result in new patch or feature releases.
So in what case I'm confused. So I assumed what Sahaj was asking was release of main after every commit, official release of main after every commit. So like, if it's not what we're discussing, if we're discussing like,
Yeah, so they both are two separate things. So we got canary releases on the pull request, which means if I'm working on a branch, let's say the foreign stream. So if I push something with the foreign stream, I expect a release for the foreign stream for that particular commit so I can test it. And let's say you merge the foreign stream to main, which is unstable main, and I expect an alpha release for the foreign stream, which could be also automatically published the same way we publish canary releases.
Yeah, and that has nothing to do with what you're talking about on
Yeah.
graphical. This is a third thing, which is an automated dependency update. That's a completely different thing. And the commits that you're seeing and that you have issues with on graphical is something completely different that has nothing to do with the change set.
okay, what basically mean like, I thought because it's every wet commit is touching something in change set, removing some files in directory called change set.
That would be like how you publish to NPM today. So if you publish 16.2 or 16.3 to NPM, that's the same thing that change set is doing today in graphical. That's that's the manual work you do. That's what change set just automates it. So you don't have to do anything. That's where you get change logs for things.
Okay, so to be clear, I'm like, if something is releasing a branch and not creating commits on or in Git history of main, I'm like totally, let's try it. Let's open PR today. I will merge it today.
Okay, yeah, that's what we want. Yeah.
Okay, so automatic release of main is I'm also okay for automatic release of main if it's not pollute Git history.
Yeah, it will be the same way. We just put like some other tag on it.
So let's basically create PR and like if you sure it's not polluting main, I will merge it.
Okay.
Probably tomorrow. Today I'm like, it's an end of the day for me today. Okay, so it was example of misconception because one tool is doing a couple of things. I assume like it's the same. Okay, so, and if you need like any commit rights, like admin rights on repo or something to enable it, just ping me. Yeah, so switching to, and so we all agree on that topic. We enable canary like releases on branches by a tool through like command automatization, and it's create like releases on npm. I'm like, okay, one thing is like security thing, like npm keys should be like, it should be some way for me to type npm key securely, and I enable two-factor authorization, but I expect this to handle that. So okay, switching back to inconsistently, next topic, inconsistent handling of directive and build IST. I responded to that issue. I think I proposed solution, and the solution require like some breaking changes. I don't think it's break like people. By the way, like discussion is that we have to function build client build schema and build client schema, and build they were designed for different use cases. Build client schema was to build client schema, assuming you want to, for example, you want to check if something supports defer or not. So you get introspection, you call build client schema, you get schema, and you check if it have extreme defer, include, skip. And build schema was designed for another case. You have SDL and you don't want to write or print like standard directives. And it's assumed like standard directives are injected. The thing that people like start using think creatively, and they use introspection for running server for some reason. But in a sense, we have a discrepancy, and I'm propose like solution for that. Sahaj, do you think like, I think like with proposal, we need to get response. I'm like totally on board with it. If people like it, it's great, because original proposal of injecting directives and everything, I think it's problematic. And I discussed why. I even had the example. Anything else on that issue?
Nothing yet. I'll read the comments and come back with something.
Yeah, sorry about posting it a couple hours before. I just like, great that you compile with list. I'm like, yeah, and automatic dependency update. So I think Yakov proposed a solution. Let's do, yeah, and I spent some time before this call actually. I thought like dependable better, but because it's like owned by the GitHub, but all the features that Yakov described, they're not supported inside dependable. So like, I agree with what Yakov wrote, Yakov proposal of starting with some restriction. So only, I'm okay with updating all non-direct dependencies. I'm okay updating like patch version of all dependency automatically. I'm like for batching it up, especially since we don't need security updates or anything, because it's all development tools. So I think Renovate propose or provide all the options. So I'm like open to PR basically that implement stuff that Yakov proposed.
Okay, great.
Anything else on that topic? Yeah, and one thing, I will reread it just in case I miss something, so we like all clear on Yakov proposal. But I think it's touches all the points. It's not creating like noise, and it's don't like do automatic updates for stuff that matter. And even with like new documentation site, we don't have too much dependencies, like, and they don't release too frequently. I agree about like indirect dependency, and I agree about like patch version, but from feature and major, like I support like Yakov proposal of not doing that automatically. Anything else we want to discuss today, or in that topic of automatically updates?
Nothing. We will just get a pull request in for this.
Okay, good thing that we saw with like misunderstanding about Canary releases. It was good that productive, because yeah, a different vocabulary by Canary releases. I always assume it meant something different. So great. Bunch of things to work on, and yeah, hopefully we will not resolve like most of these agenda items before next call and have a progress. And yeah, so unless anybody want to discuss anything else, have a good rest of the day, and it was very productive meeting.
See you guys.
Awesome.
Bye.
Right.
Bye.